Every Monday, I'm joined by best-selling author and associate editor of The Spectator, Douglas Murray. Douglas, we are seeing incredible acts of bravery and patriotism right now in Ukraine, with ordinary people risking their lives to defend their country. But it makes me wonder whether self-loathing Americans would do the same for their country. And there was a poll conducted on this very issue that showed only around 1 in 2 Americans would stay and fight to defend their country. Are you surprised by that?
I am rather surprised, actually, about it. The figures are absolutely terrible. Asked if they would do something similar to the people of Ukraine and actually stay and fight for their country if it was invaded. In America, 52% of people who said that they were Democrats, identified as Democrats, said they would flee America in the case of an invasion. And a quarter of Republicans said the same thing. So in total, just 55% of Americans said that they would stay and fight, which means that, presuming that Canada wasn't the country in doing the invading, about 150 million Americans would be hot-footing it to Canada. By the way, one of the worrying things about this poll is, of course, that generally speaking, people try to give a good impression of themselves to pollsters. You know, there are certain votes where, you know, like Trump, Brexit and other votes, where the actual outcome surprises everyone because the people told the pollsters what they hoped the pollsters would sort of want to hear and wouldn't make them look bad in the eyes of the sort of liberal-minded people who tend to be pollsters. So actually, the figures for this might really be worse than that. The idea that the majority of Americans actually would stay and fight for their country might be a vast overreach. It's very worrying, actually, but I think there are explanations for this, one of which is if you're constantly told how terrible your state is and how racist it is and how blighted it is and has been from the beginning, I'm not sure whether you would want to stay around and fight.
Well, absolutely. When your country is being demonised and misrepresented, and when you're told it's built on genocide and slavery, then yeah, what's there to defend? Now, talking about cheap taglines, a woman who excels at them and is one of the leading Democrats, Nancy Pelosi. My goodness, let's have a listen to the Speaker of the House.
But they know that we can't go there. Putin is trying to bait the trap so that we go in, and that's the beginning, could be the beginning of World War III. Putin totally irresponsible, using weapons that are not allowed under the Geneva Convention. Putin, who threatens use of chemical weapons, nuclear, and the rest. So they know that we can't, but it's the ask. Now, he was this morning if we can't have a no-fly zone, let us have our own.
Now, we've all noted Biden's cognitive decline, but what in God's name is happening with Nancy?
It's no better, is it, Rita? It's really worrying. American politics is a sort of strange gerontocracy. In both parties, it has to be said. I mean, in most countries, by the way, in recent years, I mean, certainly countries like France, Germany, Britain, and I think Australia to an extent, we've sort of fetishized young people in politics. You know, everyone always wants a fresh face. And of course, sometimes a fresh face has something to be said for it, but of course, experience has something to be said for it as well. So you could say that some countries went a bit too far into the sort of, let's have a fresh face, new face. Canada, for instance. Not that Justin Trudeau can be said to be that fresh or new, but there are a lot of countries that have went that way. America has not. America has decided that you really can't be anything in public office unless you're turning 80. The octogenarian class still runs America, and as we saw in Nancy Pelosi again this week, it has some very weird effects. We know the tendency of Joe Biden to lose his train of thought. We know the tendency of Donald Trump to sometimes lose his train of thought as well. But Nancy Pelosi is an absolute world leader in it, and of completely bizarre behavior. And yes, I wrote about this week because the latest one was for all Pelosi watchers. We watch her eagerly at all major events. You might remember last year when the man who killed the policeman who killed George Floyd, Derek Chauvin, was sentenced. Nancy Pelosi came out on the steps in Washington and with members of the Black Caucus of the Democrat Party and fully masked, Nancy Pelosi looked up at the sky and she said, "Thank you, George Floyd. Thank you for sacrificing your life for justice." Which was such a weird thing to say, as if George Floyd sort of set out that morning hoping to do something really great for his country. It was so strange, but so typically strange with Nancy Pelosi. You'll remember at the State of the Union address the other day, she sat behind Joe Biden, and at one point, she was so ecstatic and so keen to do standing ovations, although she's not very good at them, I'm afraid, poor thing, as she gets older. At one point, she threw herself up so fast she almost fell over the podium and had to sort of steady herself. And then there was she did this weird knuckle rubbing like a girl on Christmas morning about to get presents. And she did this and got up and grinned manically. And Joe Biden was talking about burn pits. And she didn't at all stop the old knuckle rubbing happy girl on Christmas morning thing. She just sat down still rubbing away. And then this week we had the great thing of her reading of the latest work by Bono. She announced on St. Patrick's Day that she had a message to read from Bono, which you know, Rita, is one of the most fateful phrases in the English language. When somebody says they've got a message from Bono, you've got to stop her. You've got to get clear out. And it was worse. She said she had a poem from Bono. And she read this interminable poem about St. Patrick and the snakes, and then and finished with an attempt to rhyme something with Zelensky that didn't really work. But she did all of this as if reading the poem by Bono was going to solve the war in Ukraine, apart from anything else. Anyhow, it was typically strange behaviour from Nancy Pelosi, and I hope people notice it, because it's very worrying that the world's most powerful nation, it seems at all of the top levels to be run by people who seem strange, if nothing worse.
Well, Kamala's only 57, but she seems to be afflicted by the same condition, because she is often also incoherent and her trains of thought just go in all sorts of directions. Now, you mentioned the issue of trans athletes. Sorry, go on.
I was going to say, Kamala Harris will probably have to sit it out and they'll bring her back to the front bench in about 30 years.
Yeah. Yeah, just when she's completely doesn't know what day it is. But onto the one of the most talked about events in the US over the weekend, the NCAA Swimming Championships, where Leah Thomas became the first transgender woman to win a title. Now, Douglas, there is a lot of outrage over this, and it's not hard to understand why, when you've got a Leah who was a mediocre swimmer in the men's competition. And now Leah is breaking records and winning gold medals in the women's competition. And that means natural-born women are missing out. They're missing out on those podium finishes. They're missing out on finals. They're missing out on scholarships.
Yeah, of course. And they'll continue to do so, all under the rubric of sort of liberalism and openness and tolerance and much more. And all of these sort of, I said, these sort of rubbishy taglines that people say, no, just love is love and all this sort of thing. These things actually have consequences, these banal claims, which then have a set of assertions behind them. Say that the big shouldered male to female trans athlete is a woman and is a total woman, or you're a bigot. And then you see the consequences of that, and girls start to suffer for it. And people say, well, it's one set of rights against another. Well, tell that to the girls who didn't make it through to the final because of this trans swimmer. Tell that to the people who came in second and third, who should have come in first and second. It's really ugly, this era, for people who make assertions they can't defend. There is no doubt scientifically that if you were born and went through puberty as a male, and if you take estrogen later on, you still benefit from the years your body developed with testosterone and much more in it. And these weird trans campaigners say things like, actually a British campaigner who was at the stadium the other day, and somebody said to her, it's not that easy to tell sex, it's more complicated than that. And she said, no, it isn't. It's not difficult at all. And this guy said, well, are you a doctor? And this British feminist said, well, I'm not a vet, but I know what a dog is. This is the thing. They've tried to make everything so complicated that everything that we all know is forgotten. And I feel so sorry, particularly for the young women in this era who just, they don't get listened to on this. One of them, thank goodness, has just spoken out on it. And I think she deserves, huge credit, because the era says to her, shut up, pretend the big-shouldered former bloke is a girl, otherwise you're a bigot. Thank goodness some people are speaking up. I hope more do.
Yes, that is a very brave swimmer indeed, who has come out and not done this anonymously. There's been a few swimmers who've expressed their concerns anonymously. You can understand, because they're all going to cop a massive backlash. They're going to be called TERFs and bigots and transphobes. Yeah. But what they're saying is absolutely legitimate. It's common sense. It's what 90% of the population probably believes. And yet you got the sports media pretending this is some jubilant moment, and any criticism of it must be motivated by hate or bigotry. I just cannot understand this disregard for the rights of women, Douglas. Where's that coming from? And so much of the feminist movement has been silent, or worse, pushing this nonsense.
Yeah. I'm afraid that people who are willing to bully other people just consistently always have a kind of advantage for a time. And there are people, the trans movement it has people who just want to live peacefully in it, but it also has a lot of people who don't want to live peacefully and want to bully people and want to do so in the name of progress and decency and much more. And these are people who've been profoundly indecent and bullying in their behaviour towards all of the people who've critiqued them. Some of them are very, very famous and distinguished women like J.K. Rowling, and others are like these, young women just starting off as swimmers. Every one of them will have this bulldozer come towards them in the name of progress. And I think a lot of stuff is wrapped up in it, including a good dose of old-fashioned misogyny, I'm afraid, because the women who speak up on this are consistently, in my observation, treated far, far more nastily than any man is. Any time I write about this issue and speak up about it, which I do whenever I can, I don't get anything. I don't particularly care anyway. Nobody particularly comes for me, But every time a woman speaks up, I notice, including my contemporaries and my friends, they always get this just horrible treatment by a sort of rampaging mob. And I think there is some, as I say, some old-fashioned misogyny wrapped up in that. There's an unequal treatment because they seem to think that they can bully women more easily. So bravo and brava to all the women who will not be bullied.
Absolutely. And you know what? I think you hit the nail on the head. There's some old-fashioned misogyny at play in this entire agenda. And the swimmer that we were talking about, her name is Rita Panahi, and she said every event that transgender athletes participated in was one spot taken away from biological females throughout the meet. So good on her for having the courage to put her name to that. And if more female swimmers did that, that would end this. This is the only way I think we're going to end it, is if the females said in unison, no more. We're not going to compete with people who've got a biological advantage over us.
Yeah.
Douglas Murray, thank you so much for joining me today. That's it. Swim with the blokes where you should be. Thank you.